Your turn, Yugi boy.
What is up, guys? This is AlintheaYoh coming here today with a top video, and this is basically like a top 11 just because I was just throwing more cards into the pool. This is just basically top cards you can use against the ABC deck that is out in a few days, so it's not too long now till our new overlords are coming. The Kyber deck will be out soon, and yeah, this is just a video to explain to you some cards that you can use as a side deck card that really do hurt how the deck functions. So I've tried to break it down this as much as possible, be as fair as possible with expensive cards and also with budget cards, so everyone can kind of use the cards and decide the ones that they want. So if there is more of an expensive card, there will be a little money up in the top corner just to point out that this is an expensive card. Before you can get into what cards can really hurt ABCs, you need to look at how the deck functions. The deck basically revolves around getting the 3 parts of the ABC Dragon into the graveyard and then just banishing all of them so that you can then summon out ABC Buster Dragon. That is basically how it works, and the most annoying thing about that is that ABC Dragon has a quick effect in the fact that it can just tribute itself and bring them all back from the banish zone, and also it can discard a card and then take out one of your cards and banish them. Important thing is your opponent cannot activate the Buster Dragon in their turn, only in your turn. So that's the basic idea of what you want to be stopping. You want to stop that Buster Dragon come out. Obviously the deck has more plays, but that's one of the main plays that you're going to be coming up against. So to start us off, obviously graveyard control is an important thing. So one card you could use for the budget players is DD Crow. DD Crow is actually a very good card. In fact, you can discard it, target a card in your opponent's graveyard, and then banish it. This will only be used in preparation for your opponent trying to set up their graveyard. Obviously, if they have something like Buster Dragon or something like that already out, it's not that great because it's already a little bit too late. DD Crow shines when they're setting up their graveyard, and if you time it correctly, hitting one of those pieces, your opponent will be completely stranded because they will have set up a strategy where they've got exactly ABC in the graveyard, and then all of a sudden you've just taken one of them out. They have a banished part and only 2 spare, and then they can't make any further plays unless they try and activate something like a Foolish Burial or whatever, not that they do. DD Crow is one of those cards that you need to hold on to and not just activate straight away, otherwise it will be pointless. You need to wait until there are 3 pieces in that graveyard, until you know that they are going to go for that play, then you DD Crow them. Alternatively, there is another card called Cycle Reader, # up here. Cycle Reader does exactly the same in the fact that it will take out 2 light monsters in your opponent's graveyard. So same function as DD Crow, you're going to be playing it at the same time, but also you can also get rid of different stuff like the ABC Buster Dragon if you so wish, if it is in the graveyard, but it's the exact same mentality and use as the DD Crow. So both of those are really good. They're actually some of the best cards that you can use against the deck, and that's a good example of how a budget player can use a card that can take cards out of your opponent's graveyard with DD Crow, and then with Cycle Reader if you want to splash a little bit more money because it's around $15 currently. Keeping the focus on the graveyard, you can also use a card like Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos and Defissure are always cards that, you know, oddly enough, hurt a lot of decks. Having a graveyard is a very important thing for a lot of those decks out there, and basically it's just one of those that is a really great card, and it is at 1, so that's one downside. You might see it less, but the other downside is you need to know how it interacts with you. If you really depend on your graveyard, Macrocosmos probably won't be one of those cards that you will be using to side. But it is an important card to remember because it can really screw up your opponent, because if you send every single card that is meant to go to the graveyard to the banish zone, then they're going to really struggle. Then if you take it on the flip side, if you think, hold on, I need my graveyard, so I can't use Macrocosmos, well, there are a few cards that you can use. For example, Imperial Iron Wall is a great budget card that you can use against this deck and other decks that are going to be running around in the meta, but we're just talking about ABCs today. Imperial Iron Wall states that cards cannot be banished. Now, there are a lot of questions on how this card works with rulings. If, for example, Macrocosmos is up and if Imperial Iron Wall is up, Imperial Iron Wall wins every time. You cannot banish cards end off. If your opponent then cannot activate the Buster Dragon effect, because ultimately you can't even banish cards, so you can't activate the discard card effect. So Imperial Iron Wall is one of those cards that is absolutely amazing. I actually think a lot of people have forgotten about how that card works and just how the card is in general. I think it's a really good one. It's definitely one for you to consider. and it's a lot more flexible arguably than Macrocosmos. However, the shortcoming of Imperial Iron Wall is that if your opponent does destroy it with a Twin Twister, a Mystical Space Typhoon, so on, so forth, the damage hasn't really retributively been done to your opponent, whereas if you use Macrocosmos, they're already far behind. Even if they destroy it a turn later, there are potential problems that your opponent has run into, whereas Imperial Iron Wall, when it goes, they'll just be able to carry on going off. Another interesting one that can be used like Imperial Iron Wall is Chaos Hunter. Chaos Hunter states that it is a level 7 Dark Monster with 2500 attack, that when your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard one card from your hand, then special summon it to your side of the field, then your opponent cannot banish cards. Now obviously you don't want to be dropping this card when your opponent summons the ABC Buster Dragon, simply because Chaos Hunter has 2500 attack and Buster Dragon has 3000 attack, so they'll just be like, okay, I'm just going to enter my battle phase, attack over it, and then carry on what I'm doing. But again, this is the whole point. You want to be able to activate these cards at the perfect time. If you think about how the ABC Dragon deck works in the setup, there's a very simple setup in the fact that you'd be using the field spell Union Hanger, then you'll be going into Bujinji Tsukiyomi, and then you'll be sending cards to the graveyards and special summoning. It's a very basic combo that will be lined out. However, the great way to use Chaos Hunter in that moment is when your opponent would summon one of the cards before they get to the ABC Buster Dragon, before they set up that graveyard. Because then one of the big problems is that they've just blocked themselves with, if you drop it on, for example, when they summon the Tsukiyomi, they've now set up their graveyard perfectly, but they can't do anything with it, and they have to rely on the cards that they've just drawn off the Tsukiyomi. So it's another good budget card. It needs a little bit of good timing and fortune, possibly with that card, but it is one for you to consider. Another decent one is Light Imprisoning Mirror. Light Imprisoning Mirror is a continuous trap card that states that all light effect monsters, effects that activate on the field or in the graveyard are negated. So it just means that you can't go off with your light monster shenanigans that your opponent might have. This one is slightly gripping at a bit of straws. It does stop the Tsukiyomi play, and it does stop a lot of other different plays. It's kind of one of those that could be used and couldn't be used. I think it is still decent and one thing to consider, especially if you aren't running any lights and you do want to load up on cards that you really can just stop your opponent with. The good thing about Light Imprisoning Mirror is that it does stop the Blue Eyes decks too, so that is one for you to consider. Now we're getting down to some of the more interesting and mainstream cards. Before we talk about them, we'll talk about Artifact Lancia. Lancia is a great card in my opinion, and one of those that is always underlooked. It's basically a hand trap for you. That's the only play that you're going to be doing it, unless you really want to bluff some back row because you know your opponent has like a Twin Twister, but even then. Artifact Lancia states that you contribute it from your hand or side of the field, and then cards cannot be banished for the turn. It's so good. It stops your opponent from making those ABC plays and basically locks them down instantly. The nice thing about Lancia is that it's a lot more difficult for your opponent to respond to effects like that, whereas if you activate a trap or a spell, there is a chance that your opponent can negate it or destroy it with the Twin Twisters or so on and so forth. With this, it is a monster effect that dodges Veiler, dodges all of those types of things. It's a really nice card that I actually think a lot of people have forgotten about, and as I said earlier, it locks your opponent down for the turn. They have to make alternate plays which might not be beneficial for what they want to do, and actually shoot themselves in the foot when they want to make a next turn play, because they might have used some of their pieces for XZ plays and now the materials are tied up on that monster. It's a lot of different ways you can use Lancia, and I actually really like it. So as I said, talking about some of those mainstream cards, we have System Down. There is that money note right up there. System Down has obviously grown in price because it is just an absolutely brutal card. Pay 1000 life points, banish all machine monsters on your opponent's side of the field and graveyard to the banish zone. Like, it's just absolutely devastating. If you can pull it off at the right time, it's absolutely brutal. Simply because it dodges the ABC Dragon's effect. It just doesn't matter about it. If your opponent tributes an ABC Dragon and then special summons out the banished ABC cards, it doesn't matter, they're going to get banished anyway. That's one of the best things about it, simply because, for example, if you activate Raigeki on your opponent and they have their ABC Buster Dragon, you go, okay, activate the ABC Buster Dragon, Chain Link 2, special them all back, they go into the graveyard. Next turn I have an ABC Dragon effect. to summon. That's where System Down really crushes your opponent. It banishes everything. It's a Macrocosmos on crack, if you want to think of it that way. It is a brutally good card, and one that I think everyone should have in their side deck this format, because ABCs are going to be massive. They are budget and they are easy to get for the most part, and I think that it's a very important card. System Down is kind of expensive. It is in a lot of different prints. Obviously the Ultimate Rare print is very expensive, but you can get it for cheap. That's why the £sign expensive thing up here is there, because it can be pricey for some people, but others it's okay. So it's just something for you to consider, but it's definitely one of those cards that needs to be picked up. Book of Eclipse is another brilliant card. With System Down and how it doesn't matter how your opponent activates the ABC Buster Dragon, Book of Eclipse is exactly the same. If you activate Book of Eclipse on your opponent will be like, I'm either going to send my ABC Buster Dragon face down, or I'm going to have to tribute it and then all my pieces are going to go face down. You might say to that, well, hold on, it means that, like the Raigeki instance, they get their cards back, and then next turn they can go for it. Yes, that is one of the things that Book of Eclipse has down for itself. However, Book of Eclipse is a quick play spell card, and it means that it can easily be frequently, flexibly used. Being able to just disrupt your opponent in what they do. If they summon their Tsukiyomi play, you can activate Book of Eclipse. They have one monster on their side of the field that they can't use, and they're going to be stuck with one card in their hand that they want to get out of their hand. It's a very important thing, and it's a really good one at that. So that is why Book of Eclipse is here, because not only is it used to stop their main advantage plays, it's used to stop how they actually play any time they want to make a combo. So that's why it's up here, and that's why it's a really good card. Then the final two, how can I not talk about these two? They are absolutely amazing. Number one, Kaijus. Kaijus are basically the best side deck card you could ever use ever for any deck. Unless you can't be over them some way, shape or form. Kaijus are just amazing. The reason why it's here is because you can just tribute your opponent's monster for free, be like, don't like that ABC Buster Dragon, get rid of it. Your opponent can't respond to it. It's an inherent summon. They can't respond to say, oh, I tribute my Buster Dragon. Nope, can't do that because I'm giving you the Kaiju before you do it. Kaijus are just one of those archetypes that are really annoying and answer a lot of different effects. You can run a little mini Kaiju engine if you so wish, with say 2 to 3 slumbers, then about 4 to 5 of the Kaijus if you so wish. It just makes handling some of these monsters and your opponent's play so much easier. It just doesn't matter what your opponent has, unless they have like a Masker Restrict. Doesn't matter, that Kaiju is going to go on your opponent's side of the field and remove one of those problematic boss monsters. And then finally, let's talk about this card. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. £, please. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is arguably one of the best side deck cards of the format, and one of the best cards you can use against ABCs. You might be saying, well, how does this work? Well, when your opponent special summons a monster, you will just get rid of the Ghost Reaper from your hand, reveal the ABC Buster Dragon in your extra deck. Obviously, you're gonna have to do that. And then your opponent has to banish all copies of their ABC Buster Dragon. That is key. You're removing their main boss monster and how they inherently apply pressure to the board. Not only have you removed that, it means that then they have to look at alternate plays, which might be very difficult. You should have a 1-up on your opponent instantly by just activating that card. Now, a lot of people have started considering running Pot of Avidity in their decks because it means that you get those banished cards back into the extra deck, but it does mean that you slow them down completely. If they opened with a card like Burial or something like that, that means that they do get to put the cards back into the extra deck. Hey, they drew their out like you drew your out. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is still one of the best cards of this format for side decks, because anyone who uses an extra deck, it's going to be brutally good in. And if you can main it, if you do have the money and the space to run Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries in your main deck, and if you do have space in your extra deck for things like the ABC Buster Dragon, the Blue Eye Spirit Dragon, Treat Toad, Dark Law, anything like that, then it means that you can really cripple your opponent very, very quickly. So that is it, guys. A kind of top 11 cards that you can use against the ABC Buster Dragon. Are there any others that you think I forgot? Let me know down in the comment section below if there are any better ones you think that I haven't mentioned. Make sure to give me a like, comment, subscribe, and I should catch you guys later.